This is going to be the third and final video for the gastrointestinal related diseases. So first up is going to be the disease antibiotic associated diarrhea, which is caused by the bacteria Clostridium difficile, normally referred to as C. diff. As with the other Clostridium organisms, it is an obligate anaerobe that can form an endospore. But this organism also forms or produces a toxin, and it can cause a pretty serious antibiotic-associated diarrhea. And so it's called antibiotic-associated because people that normally get C. diff have already been on, broad-spectrum antibiotics for another purpose. So giving them more antibiotics isn't really an option, right? Because they're already fighting another disease, and they've already wiped out a pretty decent portion of their normal microbiota. So that's why this particular bacteria can be pretty problematic, because look at what the toxins do. Toxin A is breaking down junctions of the mucous membranes, and this can result in inflammation and loss of fluid. Toxin B is actually going to target cells of the colon, and if you look at the bottom picture, you can see that it can form lesions in the colon. Now, I want to mention that originally these pictures on the right were on the previous slide. I apologize, they were in the wrong spot. Okay, they do belong here with antibiotic-associated diarrhea. So, aside from causing like this really loose stool and pretty frequent bowel movements, C. diff infection can cause dehydration and severe diarrhea. Abdominal pain and cramping, mainly in the lower abdominal area, nausea, and loss of appetite. So if C. diff just only causes the antimicrobial associated diarrhea, normally the patient is going to have anywhere from 5 to 10 watery, clear, foul-smelling bowel movements per day. If it does progress to pseudomembranous colitis, then the patient is going to have about 10 bloody stools per day, and then those intestinal lesions that I mentioned earlier that you can see on the bottom right. Now, we see the numbers 5 and 10, and you're like, that's not a huge number, but think about how often you're awake, right? Maybe 12 hours, give or take. 5 of those hours is going to include foul-smelling, clear, watery bowel movements, right? Or 10 bloody bowel movements. That's almost 1 an hour, at least while you're awake. So that's a lot, y'all. That's really, really uncomfortable. So C. diff also, from what I've told, has a very unique odor associated with it as well. So if you walk into the room, odds are you're going to have an idea of what organism your patient is infected with. Next up is Campylobacter gastroenteritis. So really, enteritis is the disease, but it's caused by Campylobacter, specifically the bacteria Campylobacter jejuni. And people can get Campylobacter infections by consuming raw or undercooked poultry, or eating something that was touched by it, okay? This infection can also be acquired by eating things like meat, seafood, and produce. If you've come into contact with infected animals or drinking, water that hasn't been treated properly. And so it is one of the leading causes of foodborne illness. And if you look at the picture on the bottom, this bacteria is more pleomorphic. It has like a spiral shaped, but as you can see labeled on the picture, some of them we describe as more of a comma-shaped or an S-shaped. So it's pretty pleomorphic there. It does produce a variety of enterotoxins, which is going to target the GI tract. It does have an endotoxin because it's a gram-negative organism, and it does have other cytotoxins as well. The signs and symptoms associated with gastroenteritis caused by Campylobacter jejuni is going to be cramping, fever, severe abdominal pain, that watery stool, And all of these are going to last for about a week. It's a pretty long time to be experiencing such discomfort. Also associated with Campylobacter gastroenteritis, although not super common, is Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a rare disorder where essentially the immune system is going to damage somebody's nerves. And this nerve damage can actually result in muscle weakness and sometimes even paralysis. So kind of some unexpected complications there as a result of Campylobacter gastroenteritis. So next up is going to be peptic ulcers. And this is caused by the bacteria Helicobacter pylori. If you look at this picture, it is a gram-negative bacillus, but it's highly motile. Look at those flagella there, lophotrichous arrangement, but it's also an acidophile, right, which is pretty advantageous considering the pH of the stomach. So this was really interesting, in my opinion, is that this was discovered by two scientists that were able to isolate Helicobacter pylori and culture it in the lab. And they served as their own guinea pigs by swallowing a large inoculum of Helicobacter pylori in order to prove that it causes gastric ulcers. Now, are you dedicated to science that way? I don't know that I am, but it worked and they actually won the Nobel Prize, right? Good thing it only caused ulcers, right? Uncomfortable, but they survived. So what happens once Helicobacter pylori gains access to the body? So once it's in the gastrointestinal tract, it's essentially going to bore through that outermost mucus layer, right? That's lining the the stomach epithelial tissues, like you can see in that picture. This is where that flagella is coming in handy. Then it's going to be able to attach to, just a binding site on the cell. And it's going to essentially entrench itself, right? And it's going to use an enzyme called urease. And that urease is going to break down urea into some alkaline compounds, which means they have a higher pH. And specifically, urea gets broken down to ammonia and bicarbonate. And by producing these more alkaline molecules, it's going to help neutralize the stomach acid. Okay, so it's going to be to a level where Helicobacter pylori can survive and replicate. So essentially, Helicobacter pylori is going to get in and infect the stomach. Oftentimes, people don't actually get any symptoms or signs, but those that do are going to experience this ache or like burning pain in the abdomen, nausea, and this abdominal pain that's actually worse when your stomach is empty. You're also going to see a loss of appetite and frequent burping. It can lead to the presence of this like tarry-like stool and black vomit. So some pretty distinct or unique symptoms. One way to diagnose this is through the urea breath test. So during this, you're essentially going to exhale into this balloon-like bag, and the doctor or whomever is going to measure how much carbon dioxide you exhaled, and that's going to serve as a baseline, because then you're going to drink this solution that contains urea. Because remember, this bacteria has an enzyme that breaks down urea. So you're going to drink this, substance or liquid that has urea, and you're going to wait 15 minutes. And then you're going to exhale again into a different bag. And they're going to measure and compare how much carbon dioxide you exhaled the second time. Because if you are infected by Helicobacter pylori, man, these words, the urea in that drink is going to be broken down and produce more carbon dioxide. So if the amount of carbon dioxide in your second sample is higher than your original amount, then you are positive for Helicobacter pylori. So it's a pretty interesting diagnostic tool. All right, two more, and these are going to be viral diseases. Okay, so we're done with bacteria. So for mumps, this is caused by a virus. This is actually a very contagious disease caused specifically by the paramyxovirus, and it is going to spread through direct contact with either respiratory droplets or saliva, or again, droplets from like the throat or the nose. And mumps is really known for that puffy cheeks and a tender swollen jaw that results as, or that is a result of infection by this virus. So specifically, it's going to be the salivary glands that are going to become swollen. It's either on one side, like you see in this picture, but it can be on both sides, right under the ear. And we sometimes refer to this as parotitis. I can't even say this. Hepatitis. There we go. My goodness. I have to think about that one. So along with this, gopher-like swelling, you're going to see nasal discharge, muscle pain, malaise. And what actually can happen is after this paramyxovirus replicates in the salivary glands, okay, it can invade other organs, the testes, the ovaries, pancreas, thyroid, and it can actually result in inflammation of the testes, which can lead to or decrease fertility. And it can also cause issues with the ovaries with dealing with infertility issues there as well. Most people do recover from the mumps and will have lifelong immunity. Last up is going to be hepatitis, and I moved around some pictures and added one on the bottom right. So hepatitis in general refers to inflammation of the liver. So while viruses can cause hepatitis, there are other things as well, like heavy alcohol use, certain medical conditions, certain medications or toxins can cause hepatitis, right? But we are concerned about hepatitis that's caused by a virus. And there are 5 hepatitis viruses, but we're really only concerned with hepatitis A, B, and C. So let's talk about them each real quick. So hepatitis A virus, that's what HAV is, hepatitis A virus, is typically found in blood and stool of infected people. Hepatitis A is very contagious and is spread by ingestion. Okay, so if somebody ingests the virus either through close personal contact with someone or eating contaminated food, drinking contaminated beverages, the symptoms of hepatitis can last about 2 months, but normally that's about it. There's not really any long-lasting illnesses associated with the illness, but there is a vaccine. So the best way to prevent it is to get vaccinated. Hepatitis B is typically spread when body fluids, so blood, semen, etc., from an infected person enters the body of someone else. So this can be through sharing needles or sexual contact or from mother to baby during birth. So not all people that get infected with HBV, which is hepatitis B virus, are going to have symptoms, but those that do are going to look a lot like the other, the signs and symptoms associated with the other hepatitises, and we'll talk about those in a minute. So for some people, if they are infected with hepatitis B, it can be a pretty short term illness, but for some people it does become chronic, and it can lead to other issues like liver cancer and cirrhosis. Hepatitis C is spread through contact with blood. So really, most infections are due to sharing needles, and so there tend to be drug-related infections. So for some people, it can be a short-term thing. But for over about 50% of people that do get hepatitis C, it does become a long-term chronic infection. So again, you can see liver cancer and cirrhosis as well. But people with chronic hepatitis C often don't feel sick. They're asymptomatic. And when they do get symptoms, when they finally appear, it tends to be a sign of more advanced liver disease. So there is a vaccine for both hepatitis A and B, right? So that's good preventative measures, but there is no vaccine for hepatitis C. So because hepatitis is inflammation of the liver, right, which can drastically impact or impair its function, you do typically see jaundice is one of the key diagnostic indicators, gray stool as well. So gray stool and anorexia and diarrhea are going to be some of those key signs and symptoms. There's also going to be pain in the upper right quadrant of the abdomen and some joint pain. I added this picture here on the bottom left because it's a very interesting mechanism that hepatitis B virus uses to evade detection by the immune system. And it is actually able, during the replication process, to form 3 different types of particles, right? So it is going to form the infectious particle, right, which we call a virion, but that virion has a special name. We call it a Dane particle. Okay, that's worth writing down, a Dane particle. And this is the infectious form of the virus that can go out and be transmitted to other people. But also during the replication process, it makes 2 non-infectious particles called a spherical particle that you see down here. It's literally just a sphere. And then it can also make a filamentous particle. So it does have some particles from the envelope. And so why this is really interesting is because our immune system is going to be trying to go after, you know, the spherical particle and the filamentous particle, which is distracting the immune system from going after the real target, which are going to be the Dane particle, which is the complete intact virion that's actually infectious. So it's almost like taking antigenic variation to a whole new level. This is not antigenic variation, right? But it's a way of disguising itself. It's less disguising. It's more like it produces decoys, right? So by releasing the spherical particle, our immune system is like, oh, hey, look at that. Let's go get it. And then it releases the filamentous particle and our body's like, oh no, what's that? Let's go get it. And so we're distributing our resources, right? So there's less available to go after the actual Dane particle, that infectious particle. Really pretty interesting tactic. All right, y'all, that's the end of our diseases affecting the gastrointestinal tract.